Hi, good evening all of you, and welcome to a new episode of Arguably the Reading Quest. In today's video we are going to talk about some of the greatest philosophical novels of all time. So this is going to be a series of 4 or 5 videos in which I will be taking 5 philosophical novels that have profoundly influenced the world of literature and philosophy, and that have shed some lights on the hitherto unknown aspects of human existence. So what is philosophical novel? I think we need not delve deeper into the realm of definition, because to each his own. Philosophical novel is something that has shed some light on the hitherto unknown aspects of human existence, something that can relate to one or the other theories of philosophy as defined in the classical, as has been discussed in some of the classical texts of existentialism or realism or phenomenology, or the human suffering, or some of the biblical themes. A philosophical novel is also defined by a theme statement, wherein a writer discusses a theme statement and then writes a novel to exposit his point. For example, the hell is other man, as said by Sartre, or let's cultivate our own garden by Voltaire, and then Voltaire writes Candide to justify this theme. So the first novel, and of course please mind it, when I put these novels in serial order, I do not mean by any stretch of imagination to rank these novels. The serial orders are just randomly determined. So the very first novel that comes to our mind, and to everyone's mind ubiquitously and unanimously, is The Brothers Karmazov by Dostoyevsky. All the existentialist fiction starts and ends at Brothers Karmazov. Just like Plato, we can just in context of Plato, we can say that Western philosophy has not progressed much since Plato. We can very well say that existentialist novelists, existential novels have not progressed much beyond Dostoyevsky. It's a towering masterpiece of psychology, literature, the human condition, and the conflict between flesh and spirit. The biblical piety and the Western rationalism. So Dostoyevsky was a nihilist, we can say. Dostoyevsky appears to be a saintly figure as well in the island of Western rationalism, whereas he challenges Western rationalism. Dostoyevsky stands at the threshold of nihilism, and he acts as a conduit to existentialism. And when it comes to Brothers Karmazov, there are certain images that there are certain parallels that we can undoubtedly draw. For example, it ranks greatest in the Western literature as compared to, in comparison with Goethe's Faust or William Shakespeare's Hamlet or Ovid Metamorphosis. And as per his biographer Joseph Frank, the Brothers Karmazov ranks and is far more influential than both Anna Karenina and War and Peace put together by Tolstoy. And in Dostoevsky's own word, if he has to say everything on life, love, God, death, suffering, and the meaning of human existence, it is to be said through one and only one book, and that is Brothers Karmazov, his last of the magnum opus, that makes Dostoevsky a saintly figure in human existence, particularly in the tradition of existential novelists. So I hope you will enjoy it. And the last message of this book is that this is my last message to you. Whenever in sorrow, seek happiness. That is what Dostoevsky tells us. So please enjoy reading Brothers Karmazov. The second novel that immediately comes to my mind, sorry I couldn't show you the book because it has been misplaced, is Voltaire's Candide. Now, Voltaire was a towering figure in the tradition of European Enlightenment, still standing against European Enlightenment and the optimism that it offers. So Candide was a scathing rebuttal of Western optimism and Leibnizian theodicy put together. Candide was a scathing and a satirical attack on there's a limit to human optimism, and that life must be lived as, the existence has to offer it, and that there is no God, there is no savior that can save you. No amount of optimism will help you cultivate your own garden, and that we must cultivate our own garden. Just to quote some of the passages from Will Durant's The Story of Philosophy, a chapter on Voltaire, which I couldn't refrain myself from doing so. So if we judge of men by what they have done, said Lamartine, then Voltaire is incontestably the greatest writer of modern Europe. Destiny gave him 83 years of existence, and that he might slowly decompose the decayed age, he had the time to combat time, and when he fell, he was the conqueror. No, never has a writer had in his lifetime such influence. Despite exile, imprisonment, and the suppression of almost every one of his books by the minions of church and state, he forged fiercely a path for his truth, until at last kings, popes, and emperors carted to him, thrones trembled before him, and half the world listened to catch his every word. It was an age in which many things called for a destroyer. Laughing lions must come, said Nietzsche. Well, Voltaire came and conquered and annihilated with laughter. So, this was the genius of Voltaire. It has been rightly said by Will Durant that while Italy had Renaissance, Germany had Reformation, France had Voltaire. So to read Voltaire's Candide is to look beyond Leibniz's theodicy, is to look beyond a world order that is not controlled by any superhuman intelligence forces, and that to make sense of that world order. Please read Voltaire's Candide. The next book that immediately comes to my mind is Knut Hamsun, Hunger. It is one of the most disturbing novels in human existence, and very less talked about in the social media and on other such platforms. So I strongly recommend Knut Hamsun's Hunger. Very lesser known, so I insist that all of you should read it. As per The Observer, hunger is the crux of Hamsun's claim to mastery. This is a classic novel of humiliation even beyond Dostoyevsky. As you know, Dostoyevsky tells us and writes a lot about the humiliation, the suffering of the human condition. But this one novel surpasses, when it comes to the humiliation part, surpasses Dostoyevsky, and one of the most disturbing novels in existence. Rebecca West says that Hamsun has the qualities that belong to the very great, a complete omniscience on human nature. So this is a story about a penniless young writer that searches for inspiration while trying to write, and desperately trying to make his ends meet in the 19th century Christiania, which is an unforgiving place. The work is thin on the ground. So roaming on the streets of Norway capital, this penniless young author searches for work, and driven to extraordinary length, sleeping under the stars with stomach growling with hunger, the writer's behavior becomes increasingly irrational and his world spirals into chaos. So hunger literally is defined in many, many ways possible. And then with every use of the word hunger, a different psychological portrait of the artist. As a hungry man, as a man famous to the core, is evoked. So this novel, if you read, appears as a long series of streams of consciousness. And every trigger, every stimulus from the external world adds to that streams of consciousness. And Hunger was Knut Hamsun's first novel that earned him the Nobel Prize for Literature in the year 1920. To quote a few lines from Hunger, "My poverty had in that degree sharpened certain powers in me, so that they caused me unpleasantness. A poor intelligent man is far nicer observer than the rich intelligent man. He is quick of hearing and sensitive, his soul bears the sears of fire." I will exile my thoughts if they think of you again, and I'll rip my lips out if they say your name once more. Now if you do exist, I'll tell you my final word in life or in death. I'll tell you goodbye. One last quote I would like to take. I suffered no pain. My hunger had taken the edge off. Instead, I felt pleasantly empty, untouched by everything around me, and happy to be unseen by all. I put my legs up on the bench and leaned back, the best way to feel the true well-being of seclusion. There wasn't a cloud in my mind, nor did I feel any discomfort, and I hadn't a single unfulfilled desire or craving as far as my thought could reach. I lay with open eyes in the state of utter absence from myself and felt deliciously out of it. So beautiful portrait of a struggling artist, the world of which is completely devoid of any comfort of human existence, and the world is brimming to the fore with disturbing images in his mind, and that largely stems from his hungry stomach. So I hope this book gives you a different insight on the hitherto unknown aspect of human existence, a very different kind of a novel written. Now, the very next name that comes to my mind is Hermann Hesse, Stefan Wolf. Again, a very different kind of modernist classic, which has not been discussed much in the modern days social media and other literary platform. So this is a story of a man, a writer, who is driven to the depth of loneliness and who is driven to his suicidal existence, and who is trying to find a sense in the world that is materialistically incomprehensible to him. And no wonder Hermann Hesse says that all I want to really try and live the life that is spontaneously welling up within me. Why is that so very difficult? So Stefan Wolf is a story of a loner, a writer, a scholar, now who is living a life of an utter recluse, and who calls himself half wolf and half human. And he is torn between flesh and spirit. He is torn between his sensual pleasures and his intellectual pleasure. But more than, as the novel is violently misunderstood, as himself quoted by Hermann Hesse, this novel is not about suicide. This novel is more about healing. A man who is now moving from a suicidal state of affair to healing. Just to quote a few paragraphs from it. I am in truth the Stefan Wolf that I often call myself, the beast astray that finds neither home, nor joy, nor nourishment in a world that is strange and incomprehensible to him. So the novel protagonist is a 47-year-old Harry Haller, is living an extremely death-like existence. Once a public intellectual, he has retreated in disgust from the modern European culture. Having lost his job, family and home, he lives in wolfish isolation, brooding by day and haunting taverns by night. Two souls war inside him, the beast yearning for savagery and isolation, and the man seeking culture, society and love. Harry longs to kill himself, yet clings stubbornly to his evil days of inward emptiness and despair. Hermann Hesse quotes, "We must become so alone, so utterly alone, that we withdraw into our innermost self. It is a way of bitter suffering. But then our solitude is overcome, we are no longer alone. For we find that our innermost self is the spirit, that is God, the indivisible. And suddenly we find ourselves in the midst of the world, yet undisturbed by its multiplicity. And for our innermost soul, we know ourselves to be one with all being." So Harry Haller, the protagonist, tells us, "For what I hated and detested and cursed above all things was this contentment, this healthiness and comfort, this carefully preserved optimism of the middle class, this fat and prosperous brood of mediocrity." So this is a shearing indictment of the middle class. That is completely a fat and brooding breed of mediocrity. That has nothing to do with the artistic instincts of life. And that has not only nothing to do with the artistic instincts of life, that also detests any artistic instinct and suppresses it consciously. So this novel, this is a self-portrait of a man who calls himself half wolf and half man, is to be read. Now, the last book in this series is The First Man by Albert Camus. One of the lesser known works of Albert Camus. Not lesser known, I would say, but lesser talked about. Okay, for one reason or the other. So, this book was published posthumously, and this was the last unfinished novel of Albert Camus before he died in a car crash. So the book is a fascinating autobiographical novel told in third person and represents a search for the author's self as well as a kind of testament. So the novel helps to put all Camus' work into a clearer perspective and brings into relief what separates him from the more militant literary personalities of his day like Malraux and Sartre. As the title itself signifies, The First Man suggests archetypal patterns. The search for identity is linked to the search for the vanished father, or dead stranger as Camus puts it. So when he visits his father's tomb at the military graveyard in Brittany, this protagonist confronts the fact that at the age of 40 he is older than his father, and his father died as a young man. So now the feeling, the emotion is completely metamorphosed. The emotions are completely transformed. So this is not the emotion of a son grieving at the loss of his father. Rather, an old man grieving at a loss of a young man in general who has died in war. So a beautiful overtake of emotion, a beautiful metamorphosis of emotion. Okay. When he was fatally wounded, the father was fatally wounded in the head by a shrapnel. Fatherless, he realized that his father too had no fatherland. Very poignant story. The notion of the self-made man lends further significance to the book's title. The first man, the young Camus, had to bring himself up alone, without the authority, without the guidance of a father, without a heritage handed down. He had to work out his own truth and morality. But the title has broader implication as well, for it refers to Algeria itself, living in vacuum, forgetful of its past, a land of oblivion where each one is the first man. This beautiful line, land of oblivion where each one is a first man. Death is a constant presence in the life of Camus, who as an adolescent spat blood and later has recurrent bouts with tuberculosis. So is the joy and convalescence and health. His love of the human body and its beauty is never oblivious of its fragility. Loss and retrieval are at the core of Camus' personal mythology, and they illumine the notion of exile to which he returns so often. Camus' voice has never been more personal than in The First Man. It speaks directly to a sense of decency, refuses to become the accomplice of events, extols neither the hero nor the saint, and proclaims that there is no shame in happiness, that a loveless world is a dead world. That is not to say that Camus is ever indifferent to the realities of history. But he knows that history can become a tyrannical encroachment, an oppressive justification, or even a weapon for the ideologues of the world. And in one of his notebooks, Camus finds quoting that one must love life before loving its meaning. Says Dostoyevsky. Yes, and when love of life disappears, no meaning can console us. So this quote is taken, this paragraph that I have spoken is taken verbatim from New York Times. Now, I summarize in my own words verbatim, and please allow me the pleasure and privilege to read it. About this book, I write, Freud once said, in my childhood I was not desirous of anything so certain as the need of a father who will protect me. With the death of God, also born for the first time the fetus of Camus' First Man, a truly self-made individual who chooses heroism over happiness, heroism over anything existential. All the history of religion tries to justify the existence of a father figure. All the history of atheism tried to negate this father figure. But all the histories of heroic individuals and the histories of the first man were also the history of indifference to the father figure. The glorious saga of mankind lies in none but one thing, either to become absurdly indifferent to father figure or to dismantle the insurmountable parameters of a society created by such patriarchs. The greatness of the literature of Nietzsche and Camus and all the progress of humankind can be summed up in just one line. All the great individuals were fatherless individuals. All of them were Camus' first men. Men who have no fathers. So please read this iconic novel, and I rate it at par with The Plague and even greater than The Outsider. Thank you so much. If you still have not liked, share and subscribed my YouTube channel, please do it. And please watch for the next video in the same series of the philosophical novels. Thank you so much.